Mad.
We're here for another episode of EVOBsession. I'm your co-host, Zach Shahan, and with me is my co-host, the other co-host, the co-host, Joe
The
Borras.
co-CEO of EVOBsession, Joe Borras.
We're going to mention that every
Welcome to this
episode
very
now.
special Thanksgiving edition
Yes.
of 2023. So now listen, I think this is important. I want to say that 2023 has been an incredible year for EVs, an incredible year for micromobility, an incredible year for climate tech. And I just think that we should take a minute and be thankful for all of these hot new cars and hot new products that are coming out. Which vehicle, which EV, since this is an EV obsessive type show, which EV have you been most excited about and most grateful to be a part of in 2023?
Me personally,
That's who I'm asking. Yes.
not the other guy.
There's only two of us.
Someone else here on the show.
You got a mouse in your pocket?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I will say I can't pick one, I don't think, but basically it's the vehicles coming from BYD, XPeng, and Neo. Those are the ones that to me are really I guess on the US market, I find the Hyundai Ioniq 6 very fun and interesting. It's like a throwback to the EV1 to me. Like when I see it out on the road, I think of the EV1. That hyper efficient design, small, like weird, but in a cool way. I think to most people would look pretty cool. Looks sporty. So I think it's a fun. I've just got some pictures of it yesterday in front of Best Buy, which are on an article we will talk about today, and I've just seen it all over the place now. So it's fun to see it getting out there. What about you?
That's awesome. For me, I think it's the Aventon Abound cargo bike. I got one of these earlier this year as a test and review bike. And, usually these things, when I review them, I put about 5 or 10 miles on them. They end up sitting in the garage collecting dust. This thing has been all over town. We've put 100 and something miles on it. This has been a great little bike. It has replaced so many short trips by car around the neighborhood. And I just know that next year it's going to replace 100 more. It's a fun little vehicle. And I think if more people had access to bikes like this, whether they come from Lectric or Aventon or Specialized, my favorite bike, I think that, we could really put a dent in our carbon emissions as a society from switching to some of these bikes.
Yeah, I absolutely love cargo bikes. As I think I lived in the Netherlands for 5 months where they bike all the time. Actually, I lived in Groningen, which is the highest bike commute rate in the world, 50 to 60%.
Oh, that's cool.
Bike commute rate. Like you go down to Amsterdam, you're like, why are there so many cars here? This is horrible. Because it's like double the bike commute rate of Amsterdam. So it's just awesome. And I've seen people lowering sofas from like the third story of a kind of old style apartment building down into a cargo bike to transport it. I've seen them, I think, transporting a piano on a cargo bike, if I recall. A lot of kids get transported on cargo bikes in the Netherlands. That's fun. Got a lot of pictures of like 4 or 5 kids in a cargo bike box, whatever. So it's just absolutely underrated, awesome thing. I love how e-bikes have taken off, but I would love to see cargo bikes really get that kind of popular here. But not in Florida. It's too hot.
It's way too
horrible.
hot in Florida.
No, it's horrible just to walk outside in Florida most of the year. So it's like, doing anything, it's tough. But yeah, let's get on to the stories. We have a lot. Let's see. The first one here is, I think we had to start with this. We thought about trying to start with something else, but this is a big story. So Cruise co-founder, senior exec Dan Khan quits, and that's the day after Cruise CEO, co-founder.
Kyle Vogt.
I think co-founders. That's who I always think of when I think of Cruise, is Kyle Vogt, but it doesn't say co-founder. But he was a co-founder, right?
He was a co-founder, yeah, for sure.
The co-founder. Like,
exactly right.
So like one of us is the co-host, on this show. We want to say. I'm just kidding.
No, but I think it's
exactly
like, that's me. I think it's worth bringing up here that, like, we talked about Cruise having its issues with that accident that it had where that woman was unfortunately dragged several feet, and they shut down operations first in California, then they shut down operations in Texas, Arizona, and then they put a pause on everything, and then the CEO resigned, and now Dan Can resigned. So like it seems like stuff is bad over there. And I think this speaks in a larger sense. I think a year ago you would have said maybe Cruise is the furthest ahead of anybody. Cruise is, the most successful of the robo-taxi brands. I think 6 months ago, maybe I would have argued that. But looking at it now, it's really seems problematic. And it seems like this is speaking to the robo-taxi industry in a larger sense. Like this is a little bit harder to pull off than I think a lot of people thought it would be.
Yeah, no, I think you highlighted it really well. And pre-show, you helped me to like formulate this as well, because yeah, I mean, I think Cruise and Waymo have long been sort of seen as leaders in the West for that model. A lot of
Yeah.
Tesla supporters and fans believe that model is just fundamentally broken and or just not good enough, and that the Tesla model is what's needed. But basically, you have those two models in the West, and some other companies in China that are doing the same thing or even more advanced versions, but with the help of government and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's Cruise and Waymo. They're always the ones the first to do stuff, and this is a total like massacre of the leadership, founding teams. As Jennifer Sensiba puts it, a seppuku. I don't know how seppuku probably is how you pronounce it.
Seppuku, sure.
Seppuku. Oh, there we go. That sounds more Japanese.
That sounds right, doesn't it?
Yeah, seppuku. That's got to be right. It sounds better. But yeah, I mean, basically highlighting that, there's things that people who follow this stuff understand, and then there's things that the public thinks about these technologies and these companies and these changes. I think everybody who follows the industry closely, they understand there's going to be deaths. Everybody is, knew for the past decade. I was at a conference, presenting at a conference, where that was a big topic of one of the presenters, was like, how do we deal with the ethical dilemma that there will be some deaths, and how are those
right,
like programmed, accepted, communicated? So she was warning back then, like we got to be ready for this. And I think they weren't. I think they were like, they hadn't really communicated, or maybe hoped it would happen so long down the road that it would be just brushed over. But I think they had a challenge of, all of a sudden everybody sees these robotaxis as killer robotaxis that could kill them, and is not looking at the nuance of how this accident happened, how many potential lives Cruise saved by not driving like a human. But yeah, this is the dilemma. Like now Cruise is like basically shut down, and what's around the corner for it, and also how do Waymo get out of it unscathed?
yeah. And I think it's worth, one thing that you said is really key here, and I think really critical to the understanding of this conversation, is the comment that how many lives were saved because it wasn't driving like a human. And I think there is and I've said this before, there's a hype factor here, where there are people who, and I would say, believe the hype and the promise of autonomous driving. And they really believe in their heart humans are bad drivers, robots are good drivers. And you can see that in some controlled circumstances, there's ways that the autonomous outperforms the human. But I've always kind of erred on the other side and says, no, humans are pretty good drivers. Most humans have a million miles under their belt and no accidents, or one or two accidents that maybe were their fault, maybe not. And I think that for the most part, humans are good drivers. And this is an underestimation of that fact. And I think that people who are very susceptible to that hype, people who are very susceptible to the idea of, let's say, human inefficiency or human badness, are going to be all over this and be very excited about autonomous. But I think the challenge is much greater than most people understand. I think there's a lot more math going on under the hood. of the human brain than a lot of these guys realize and appreciate. And I just don't buy it. So I think that the
Yeah,
really important thing here is to understand that this is harder than it looks, to understand that this has ramifications throughout the industry. And if you're an investor in Tesla, a company whose CEO has said, we get robotaxi right, the company's worth a lot of money. We get robotaxi wrong, it's worth basically nothing. I think you need to be looking at this and going,
yeah.
maybe
Well,
I don't want to put all my eggs in this basket.
yeah, there it may not seem like it on the surface, but there's a lot that's relevant to Tesla here as well. But I would just say, I think a while back we covered Cruise the story before, and there was an interesting take out there that we simply don't have the data and the rigorous statistical analysis to say whether Cruise or Waymo have caused more accidents or fewer, protected lives or not. Like, there's claims obviously on the Cruise and Waymo side that they have had fewer accidents and protected lives, but there's not third party proof of that, evidence of that. And personally, I still think, like, this case in particular, the lady was first hit by a human driver.
Yes.
And bounced like in front of the robotaxi. The robotaxi then hit her and dragged her. And I initially think, oh, see, humans have more common sense than we realize, and deal with these kind of things better, like they wouldn't drag it. But then you think, no, how many hit and runs are there? How many hit and runs are there every day? Like, there are definitely drivers who would drag that person even further than the Cruise vehicle did, and just get out of there. And just get out of there. I didn't do it. I'm out. I don't. I mean, so I think it's a real gray area, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say what's better. It depends on what you're comparing, and there's a lot of it's not just accidents, it's like type of accidents. It's like fender benders versus major accidents. It's like, yeah, there's a lot. So the I think the communication issue is that all of this is presented like these are self-driving vehicles that don't hit people, and the public is like, what, you hit someone, you're a killer vehicle. And that also applies to Tesla, and that's what a lawsuit is going on about right now in Florida, where I'll just briefly present. I mean, there's a case of an accident in Florida where the
fatal accident
where the family is arguing that even though there are disclaimers about Autopilot and there are warnings and you have to touch the wheel to make sure to show it you're paying attention and all this stuff, that it's marketed as like really self-driving. Like, okay, we have to follow the rules, the laws on this stuff, and you have to check this box, but really it's self-driving, wink wink. Right. And so that's the argument the family is making, is that's how it's been marketed, and that's why this person died, because they trusted it too much. I've got my own 2 cents on that, and it's, again, a gray area. It's nuanced, but I've presented it, so take it away. And what do you think?
Yeah, and I think the critical thing here is not that, the issue here is not what Elon knew or what Tesla marketing knew or didn't know. I think the issue here is public perception. If you willfully market a product using names like full self-driving and Autopilot, it's sort of like vitamin water. And I understand the irony of bringing up the vitamin water case, because a judge ruled that no reasonable person would believe vitamin water was healthy. But it's sort of like vitamin water.
That's some bull crap. Of course, we see vitamin water and we're like, well, at least that one's healthy.
At least this one has vitamins, right? But it's the exact same thing. So in this case, the ruling might go the other way, and they're going to say, well, yeah, a reasonable person would say, yeah, the thing is full self-driving. I paid $10,000 or $15,000 for it. This is a real thing that works. So here we go. Let it drive for me. And if the judge finds that, in this case, what actually happens is there becomes a precedent. And that means that other families might be able to sue Tesla and go after punitive monetary damages. And that could be, by now, hundreds of potential people, if there's not already a class action lawsuit saying that there's this is being marketed incorrectly, which, by the way, there is a class action lawsuit
Yeah,
against
we
Tesla
covered
saying that these are marketed incorrectly.
covered that.
But
That was a
once
while back, and I'm curious what happened to that. But I guess it's
it's
just the legal
ongoing, it's
process is
ongoing.
slow.
Yeah, it's ongoing. But I think, the thing that you really want to take into account here and take into consideration is now you have a scenario where it's not just the families of the driver who was killed. It's now, if the car goes into the back of a fire truck, now the fire department can hold the company liable and start suing for damages. Now the municipality can start doing that. So this really opens a big can of worms that hitherto has been closed. And
Yeah, well,
it really opens up a potential nightmare Pandora's box for Tesla and Tesla shareholders.
yeah, and there's a couple things on the autopilot thing. So what Elon Long said is that autopilot, it's like autopilot on airplanes, and he has a license to fly, and he had a jet that he flew a lot. And he's like, it's the same. That's why it's called autopilot, because the same kind of system. And you can't like not fly the plane on autopilot. You have to monitor it and everything. It's not like you just turn on but the public perception is that you can. The public perception of autopilot in a plane is that that you can actually just turn on autopilot, go to the bathroom, go do whatever. Right. And there's not quite the understanding that he has of autopilot. And I've argued the case like this, that case that he argued many times. But at the end of the day, like the same person over and over will think they're saying that it's fully autonomous, and just the general public, I think, reads autopilot and thinks, oh, it's autonomous. And then the full self-driving is clearly like telling you it's full self-driving. It's just not ready yet. Like you're buying the software package that
it's full self-driving, but it's beta.
And it's like so I mean, we even had the point where we changed to just calling it FSD to try to not contribute to any confusion. But yeah, I mean, I think it, like you said, the thing that links them both is public perception, and the public perception is this was supposed to be much more autonomous and self-driving and perfect than it's turning out to be. So that's what a lot of people, I mean, I don't know how many people even see this news or what they think of it. There's clearly the followers who understand all the details and there's nothing new. And then but I think there are a lot of people who then are like, oh, this is much scarier and not as perfect as we thought it was from the initial news of this stuff. So
and especially as it connects to
the social media hype around it, which was extreme on the Tesla case. We had people sleeping and all that stuff in the car, and all kinds of weird shenanigans that should have been not just not promoted by Tesla, but it should have been called out as like, you can't do that. Instead, there was more of a wink wink thing going on, which contributed, I think, to these misperceptions.
Well, and I think that's a very good point. Like, and I hate to bring this into it, but it was sort of like, when Charlottesville happened and the tragedy that happened there. And at that time, we had President Trump, who's a racist and a fascist and an idiot and a criminal. And he came out and did not denounce the white supremacists, right? And it was a real easy win. All you had to do was come out and denounce the white supremacists. Like, all you had to do, Elon Musk, was come out and say, guys, don't do that. That's dangerous. You need to watch this. But what they got was a little bit of a wink and a little bit of a nudge and like, we don't recommend that, but like, isn't that cool?
Yeah, exactly.
And that leads to this same kind of problem. So it's very upsetting.
So we'll see where the case goes. I mean, now I think what this news is basically, they can make that case. They can really bring evidence, have discovery to try to make that case, because it's kind of established as a possibility. It's not necessarily that it happened, but it's a possibility. Yes. But we'll move on from that stuff to some simpler news. Brightdrop has been fully acquired by GM. I actually thought Brightdrop was always fully a part of GM. I was like, wasn't it already a full subsidiary of GM? But I guess
it was. So yeah, Brightdrop was interesting. It was a startup that was owned by GM, but it was operated separately. In other words, it was a complete separation. where GM policy did not, in other words, GM didn't control BrightDrop. They were a preferred supplier, but BrightDrop ultimately could source things from other companies. It was not beholden to GM. And now, having been absorbed, BrightDrop becomes a full-fledged division of GM in the same way that Chevrolet and Cadillac are. So this is now a full-fledged GM product. It's not a product that GM has invested in. It's a GM product. So it's nuanced, it's subtle, but if you're a GM dealer, if you're a GM supplier, this is good news for you. This makes things a lot easier if you want to jump on the BrightDrop bandwagon. And yeah.
I think it also just says GM believes in it. Like, right? It's like if it was like things weren't going well at BrightDrop, they'd be like, oh, we dropped this startup and it wasn't really us anyway. But
not necessarily. It could mean that GM does not want to publish the losses there, and it believes that the PR failing would be worse than what it can do, so it can absorb some of that. There's going to be redundant staff that it can get rid of. It can do some cost cutting. So there is a school of thought that says this is very positive, but this is also a way of obscuring what's really happening at BrightDrop.
so it could be either way.
Could be either way.
It
Yeah,
could be highlighting it or obscuring it. But that's
exactly.
good stuff. I think it's positive to see that. I'm really eager to see BrightDrop grow and expand as a
Yeah,
full.
BrightDrop does great stuff. They're so smart over there.
Yeah, they do. So this is one I was really excited about. I almost started with this. So Hyundai, we talked just last show about how Hyundai and Kia lead the charts for fastest for most miles added per hour of charging. Just absolutely leading the way on that. And so Hyundai had an announcement yesterday that a new interbrand study is a study that's going on for decades, and is really, like, I think, established, well-respected study of brands, or annual report on brands. So Hyundai has just gone up and up and up in the brands ranking, but it's especially gone up in the past 4 years as they've focused on electrification, the future of the industry, and it's really it got a big boost in the last update, 18% boost in its brand value, and it's all been tied to this, electrification and future mobility. And it coincided with an announcement that they opened an innovation center in Singapore.
Yeah,
where they also are now producing a Hyundai Ioniq 5 robotaxi. Speaking of coming back to the robotaxis, that is that they're going to be start delivering to Motional commercial services fleet in next year. Mm-hmm. So level 4 SAE autonomous vehicle. So just all around successful, good company that's improving and growing. And yeah, that's the Ioniq 6 I saw yesterday at Best Buy. There's the picture. I think it's just more evidence of Hyundai's EV and efficiency leadership. But
yeah, that's such a hot car too.
What do you have to say as a Hyundai owner about its brand?
I don't know. What I'd say to that is, look, they've been building great cars now for the last, I want to say, like, since 2018, 2019, they've been building some of the best cars in the industry. If you have not been paying attention to what Hyundai is doing, and you went and, hopped into a new Palisade, or I know you didn't like the i30, but if you're in an overseas market, you hop into an i30N. These are phenomenal little vehicles. They are pretty much better than anything in their class. If you look at the Ioniq 5, I think that's a genuine challenger to the Model Y. You look at the Ioniq 6, I think that's a solid competitor to the Model 3. These are great looking vehicles. They're put together well. They drive great. And, the technology is really second to none. And I think that the world is starting to understand that this is not Hyundai from 20 years ago. This is a whole new company. They are knocking this out of the park. They are not building cheap, trashy cars anymore. This is a solid vehicle. And it's funny, if you go back to that picture of Best Buy,
This one or the other one, or it doesn't matter.
the other one. Yeah, if you look at the car on the far left, you've got a green Kia and you've got a silver Genesis there in the corner. Both of those are brand new vehicles. The Ioniq 6 is a brand new vehicle. So wherever you are, they seem to be picking up what Hyundai and Kia and Genesis are putting down.
You also have a Kia Soul in the back right there, right?
That purple thing, that's a Scion XB.
Oh, Scion. Oh, sorry. Yes, I was.
Right.
Yeah, I I'm all about it. I've been singing their praises for a while. Notably, we talked last show, and it's in this article. I put it in this article, the video about Hyundai partnering with Amazon, the first automaker to do so. Again, sort of leading the way, leading the charge.
Yeah. Is that a Thanksgiving joke? Gobble auto sales?
Slightly, yes. Yes. Pretty much, yeah.
Fantastic.
It was the first time the brand, it's hard for the brand to actually move in this ranking year after year, but it rose from 35 to 32. Really, really big movement there, and it's just winning. Hyundai is winning. So
Hyundai is winning.
Hyundai.
Exactly right.
And I said at the end, like, the three vehicles we would be most likely to buy next are the Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, and the Tesla Model Y. And I'm pretty sure the Ioniq 5 leads the way. So if you want to sell it to me for a good deal, for a good price, no.
It's going to the brother-in-law.
Oh, cool! Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Does he have an electric, or does this be his first?
It's my Ioniq 5 is going to the brother-in-law.
I know, but
that's his first electric. Yeah,
that's his first electric. Oh, that's awesome! I love it.
No, he's excited about it.
I love when you get them the first, in the first EV. So we also have.
Oh yeah, that's right. Like when you convert them.
Yeah, when you're like the one who really makes it happen.
Yeah, I've done a few of those conversions now, so they're a little bit less special. But yeah, you're right. That's a good feeling. That's a good feeling. I think he's gonna like it.
So we have some Ford news: F-150 Lightning powering a e-scooter business. That's interesting. And Blue Oval City chugging along. You have any comments on these announcements from Ford?
No, as much as I love little scooters and I think people should own them and use them, I think the rental scooters are a plague on modern cities. And the fact that Ford is making those things more viable is upsetting.
I'm not convinced it's the best way to charge scooters. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the details of the guy's business and all that, but it's not the most efficient thing to charge the truck and then use the truck to charge the scooters.
Oh, I don't know about that, because you don't have, sometimes you don't have the infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, if you need it, obviously, but like if you can charge them directly from the grid or something, but
I think that's the point,
have
is
less,
that you can't.
less electricity loss, and also not degrade the battery of the F-150 Lightning.
I think it's so minimal. Like I have the Go Tracks, the G Pro, which is like the biggest, baddest Go Tracks you can get, or at least it was when I bought it. And I bought it at the Electrify Expo in Seattle. I just thought it was so much fun to drive around in that thing. There's a bunch of pictures of me on it. And even that, I think, has like a 500-watt battery. So I think it's so minor. I mean, you could have a fleet of like 20 of these things and you would use such a small percentage of the truck. I think it actually might be not the worst idea.
Yeah, and then the Blue Oval thing is just like, there's going to be Blue Oval Village instead of Blue Oval City. Blue Ovalton, Jennifer said, instead of Blue Oval City for a few years. It's just that it's not going it's not going to grow as fast as initially.
Ford has so many problems right now. The fact that they're even paying attention to this is really upsetting.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, they have very ambitious plans, and of course we'd love to see those come to fruition, but even the scaled back plans are huge. So it's still moving in the right direction. It's hard to read the market in a big transition like this, and with the macroeconomics at play. We have from China, NIO has long been a leader in battery swapping, and just like the battery swapping EV maker, automaker, since basically it took over that mantle from Better Place, which was just in Israel and collapsed on itself several years ago. But there's always been a debate: is it a good approach or not? But NIO has over 2,000 battery swap stations out there. It's done 32 million battery swaps. It's clearly doing them. They started doing
They're
them.
clearly doing it.
They're doing them in Europe, but now they've got this sign on. They've got this the support and collaboration of another major automaker, Changan, which is a big automaker in China, which is they're going to help build out the network together, keep building out and setting the standards, and just going to expand this. So there was a good comment from Matt, one of our readers and supporters, Matt Fulkerson, that it seems weird to expand battery swapping when charging gets getting faster and faster, making it seem less needed. But I think in the case of all these mega cities in China and elsewhere, there's still an appeal to like, oh, I just pop in, get my battery swapped, and it's done, and don't think about chargers being down or chargers being having to wait in line at a charger, or having to make sure you find the fastest, newest version of a charger. I think there's still like a real convenience and luxury to knowing, hey, I buy a NIO or a Changan, and I can pop into any of these power swap stations and get a new battery whenever I need it, and it takes a few minutes. So I think it's a really effective what they've been doing. They have like over 1,600 patents for battery swapping. So I mean, they're hunkered down on this. This is what they're doing, and it's just, I think it's impressive to see that they've sort of like with the Tesla supercharging network and standard. Now there's others joining, and that makes a big difference in viability.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've made a really good point when you talk about the luxury of this. It's not a question of what we need, especially here in America. We don't buy stuff that we need. We buy stuff that we want, and we justify the need for it later. Like if you go to the Home Depot twice a year and load up on stuff for the garden, well, I need a giant pickup truck or F-150 or something. Yeah, okay, maybe, but that's not actually true. That 1% use case is not justification for the other 99% of waste. But that said, I
I
think
thought you were
China
going to
is
talk
very
about all this
similar.
stuff I get at Home Depot that I don't use.
Now that's a totally different argument. But no, I think that's it. It's worth saying that in this sense that, yeah, maybe the charging infrastructure is getting faster and charging is getting faster, but we may have 500 kilowatt charging tomorrow. That doesn't mean that a 500 kilowatt charger is going to show up in your neighborhood tomorrow or be where you need it when you need it. So I think that there's still a place for this. I think there's going to be a place for this for quite a while yet. And I think they're doing the right thing. The question is if and when they come to the US, are they going to bring this with them?
That's a good question. I mean, they've done it in Europe, and
they've done it in Europe. Yeah. And I think that is really I think that's really the killer app, as they say, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think they have to do it in the US, and it's interesting. I hadn't really thought much about it, but the US, we have more standalone houses, more home charge, and that's those markets are not going to need it as much. But there are all these big cities as well where it's much harder to go electric. Like,
yeah.
So we have it's not as uniform as we think often. So in all these big cities where it's harder, you don't have home charging by default, battery swapping could work really well. And they have higher cost of living, higher pay, and they can afford a NIO more easily too. So I think I'm really interested to see NIO finally get to the US market and bring battery swapping to places like New York City, Chicago, LA, Washington, D.C. So that's an interesting point.
I think the real interesting question is going to be not in the cities, yes, but not so much in the cities as Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Wyoming, where you're driving long distances. If knowing that a battery swap station is there at the rest stop is going to drive NIO sales in the city, because even if you have access to home charging, you're thinking about that road trip, you're thinking about that long drive, and you know that you can make that swap in 5 minutes. even if you can charge in 10 or 15, and even if you would never want to just charge for 5 minutes, the perception isn't there. Somebody tells me I can get a brand new battery in this thing in 5 minutes. Great, let's do it.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's anyone who's addicted to convenience, and I mean, it's Americans. Like, we're the home of McDonald's, the home of Burger King. We are the convenience kings. So I think it will appeal to a lot of people who value convenience much
Exactly right.
higher than.
So this is the last one, yeah?
No, we have a couple more. We
Okay,
don't
go.
have to say anything about this. Sodium ion batteries, Northvolt BYD, they're coming.
Great.
Komatsu building has bought American Battery Solutions in Michigan, who to basically produce batteries for its heavy duty electric vehicles that it's planning to build. Big heavy duty vehicle story. Kamatsu is a giant in the heavy duty vehicle industry. And the last one, do you want to say anything about those or no? I know
Dude,
you're.
Kamatsu is making a ton of moves in this. They just rolled out an electric excavator a couple days ago. I'm writing it up for Clean Technica now.
Oh, cool.
And this kind of thing where they're buying up battery technology. They're buying this up and still collaborating with companies like Volvo CE and Cabelco and others to really put out a standardized charging infrastructure so you can have a mixed fleet on site and still make that work. And buying up these battery patents is just going to accelerate that. This is great stuff.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Skanska North America using the Volvo electric excavator, the largest in the world. And we talked about that on this show here too previously. So that's all in that article as well. But yeah, and I mentioned before, our friend in Poland works for Kamatsu. It's like, there's Kamatsu, there's Caterpillar, there's a few major companies in this space. I'm not really aware of this industry, but I know there's a few, and Kamatsu is one of them. So there's a big move, I think, that's buying a battery maker in Michigan too. That's interesting. The last story: Tesla Cybertrucks are rolling into Tesla stores this week. In fact, I just got word that today you can go to the Tampa Tesla store and see one. It's there now. But across the country, Black Friday week, you can touch a Cybertruck in Tesla stores. I think that's a big deal, Joe.
I think that's very brave.
Joe's like, I can see all the thoughts flying around your head.
I think that's very brave. And I wonder what the public will think of it once they can see it in the flesh.
I wonder if people will be allowed to touch it. I mean, they should be, yeah. But then there's going to be a lot of fingerprints on that stainless steel.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like it's not going to take very long for this thing to look like trash.
I don't know.
So,
I'm very curious. I'm open-minded and very curious to try to gauge how the public is experiencing it. I mean, I'm really curious. I'm open-minded because
yeah,
I don't know
I
what.
think it's going to be.
But the
I think it's going to be
fingerprints
really
might be
interesting.
like, I would rope it off. I'd be like, you can look at it, but don't touch it,
Yeah,
because with all the fingerprints, it's gonna look messy real quick.
yeah, and I think it's going to be. We've talked about this to death, and I think it's going to be interesting. I think the people who like it are going to really like it. I think the people who hate it are going to really hate it, and it remains to be seen what kind of financial success or failure this is going to be.
Yeah, well, that's it.